Hello everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today on this webinar, Build a Better Homepage and See Better Results. So my name is Ricky and I'm a digital business advisor at Business Station. So today we're going to look at how you can improve your homepage in terms of layout and content and other things which we'll talk about to attract more website visitors and ideally increase conversions. So I'm going to just paste some links into the chat function now that you might want to use through this presentation, because I do refer to a few things. Let me just sort that out quickly. And these links will enable you to basically, just click on the link when I refer to it. Okay, so I'll just send that now. And there you go. So there's some links in there you might want to access as I talk through them. Now, let's just, and also before I go on, if you have any questions, please just, yeah, no worries, Wendy. If you have any questions, just do what Wendy just did, throw a question or a comment in the chat function and we'll get on to those questions as soon as we can. So let's have a quick look at what we're going to talk about today. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is why the homepage is important. And it's often an overlooked page. It's sort of considered almost like a doormat to the website, whereas it should be really your storefront, so or your business front. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Also, how to do an audit of your existing homepage and to see basically what maybe you're missing and what content you should include on your homepage. We'll then talk about different stages of planning, what your goals are, what you want to achieve from your homepage and your website, not just your goals, but also what do you think your visitors' goals are, and that's super critically important. Then we'll briefly touch on what content you should have on there, what calls to action, things like, starting to build that sort of content on there, and how to optimize your homepage from both an SEO, so in other words, attracting people to your website, and a conversion perspective about, getting them to do what you want them to do, essentially. Okay, so why is the homepage important? It's really important because it's the most likely way that people are going to enter your site. So it's like the doorway to your site. It's also the most likely page, which is related to the first point, most likely page on your website to rank on a search result. And that's just the way SEO works. The most likely page that will be put up as a search result would be the most authoritative page of your website, and that's usually the home page. It could also be collections or product categories, but it's most likely to be the home page. It's also where your visitors are going to make that critical decision whether they continue, whether they trust you, or whether it's not quite what they were looking for and they're going to go somewhere else. So key to that is what's often called the 7-second rule, or it's that content above the fold. The first thing that they see is above the fold. And that's really where you need to have that impactful message about what you do, how does it help them, and what they need to do next. And it's also the page where you move them through your sales process or your sales funnel. So it's where you, for example, you capture leads, you capture their email address, and you continue marketing to them from there, or you direct them to your product pages, your category pages, etc. But it's most important, you really need to answer that question for the visitor. Can I help you look for what you're looking for, essentially? I know it sounds simple and logical, but we often overlook this. So you need to consider who your visitors are, what they're looking for, and make sure you're addressing that in your homepage content and layout. So always think of it from the user perspective with your goals in mind, of course. Okay, so in terms of homepages, there's a few different types of homepages. We're going to talk primarily about this type of one, a transactional homepage. And this is where there's usually some sort of clear call to action involved. You really want them to do something and ideally transact. So we'll talk mostly about that. There are other homepage types. There's this one here, which is often referred to as categorical, where you're given an option. It's almost like a landing page in front of two separate types of homepages, if you like. So do you want this or do you want that? And you direct the user that way. And then the third type is more consumptive. So it's where, like news sites and blog sites and informational type sites, where it's about content that people are going to consume. So with that in mind, and keeping in mind, we're talking about transactional homepages mostly, what are the elements you should have on your homepage? Well, here's some of them here. And of course, you can have more or less of these, but some of these are very, very important. So your top menu, for example, starting there, it should include your logo, for example, and basic navigation that's directing them to where you want them to go, rather than not so much irrelevant information, but other information you could have on other navigation, and we'll talk about that. And what your primary call to action is, you should potentially have that in your top menu on the right-hand side if you can. What's your headline and your sub-headline? Calls to action, whether you've got a primary call to action or a primary and a secondary, and keeping in mind where the visitor's coming from. If they don't know who you are, they've never heard of you, they're likely not to click on a buy now button, for example, if they're still sort of researching who you are and what you do. So that's an important consideration from a call to action perspective. Think about the imagery that you're using above the fold too. Often referred to as a hero shot, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a full screen image, but it should support your headline and your call to action. The next step might be something along the lines of how your solution works. Now, if you're, say, a fashion retailer, that sort of is illogical, if you like, but you might talk about, this is where you maybe introduce your products, maybe your product collections or categories. But if you're not that sort of e-commerce type business, then this is really where you explain how your solution works and how it could benefit them, essentially. This is where, because at the above the fold, you're really talking about your primary target audience here, because you might have more than one type of customer. And sometimes you can't talk to them all at once. You need to identify who your primary persona is and sort of target them above the fold. But as people scroll down the page, you might also introduce other avatars or other customer types. So, we have this solution for this type of customer, this solution for this type of customer, and this solution for this type of customer. So Wendy asked, if you can't see that, what do I mean by fold? So above the fold is the term that's referred to. Well, it comes from the old newspaper days when people were on a train or public transport, they would fold their newspaper, and that section on the top was the most valuable part of the newspaper in terms of attracting advertising and that sort of thing, or putting the primary headline in there. Same applies to your website. So whatever loads in their first screen is the above the fold before they scroll, yes. So this is really important, because this is where they're going to make their decision. And it's also important from a range of other perspectives too, like from a performance point of view. You don't want that to be super slow. You want it to be fast loading and tell people exactly what I'm telling you here. So how it helps them solve their particular solution, for example. Problem, for example. So that's what I refer to as above the fold. Whereas from the say how it works section and down, that's below the fold. And we'll talk about that as well today. So who's it for is where you could introduce use cases or other sort of target audiences. You could include trust builders here. So trust builders are, you'll sometimes see customer logos. Here are some of our top customers, or also you'll also see it sometimes that as seen on, for example, different media organizations. But testimonials are super important. Even if you don't have 5 or 10, if you have one good testimonial, then put it on there, and you should go out of your way to seek that really good testimonial. Or if you've got Google reviews, for example, get them, copy them from Google reviews, or embed them on your homepage. And maybe some customer stories, case studies. Then, of course, you've got the footer. The footer is important because this is where you put other information that people might be seeking. So your extended navigation, it could be your privacy policy or your return shipping policy, terms and conditions, all of those sorts of things, they're fine to have in your footer. Same with any sort of company information, legal information, and that sort of thing. You could also have your socials in there, although you'd probably want to promote them a little bit more, but you could also have your socials in there, maybe links to your blog posts or whatever. So that's also important. So they're the key elements we're talking about when we're talking about the home page. Now, the first thing you want to do in terms of if you want to understand maybe what you need to do on your website is maybe start with doing some sort of auditing of your site. Now, we're not talking about, well, I guess we are talking some sort of spreadsheet type auditing, but it's really just this table. If you want to download this, maybe you can do this in your own time because we don't really have time to do it here. But what it does is it allows you to go through each section of your web page, assuming they're all there. They may not be there in your particular instance. And then you score them based on exceptional through to unsatisfactory. And then you review it again once you've done some of these things to see if you're improving the quality of your homepage. So that's in one of the links that I provided there, and you might just want to download that and do that in your own time. And it will give you the ability to score 1 to 4 essentially. So do give that a go. List the action items you need to fix, and we'll resolve them. And hopefully you'll have some knowledge along the lines of what you should be doing by the time we finish this webinar. So that's a good starting point. Do a bit of an audit, understand where you stand in terms of those 4 areas. Now, I also, you know, if any of you have been to any of my other webinars or workshops, you'll see that I do talk about Google Analytics sometimes. It is a great tool for you to understand what your visitors are doing on your particular website and maybe identify areas that you have issues with, particularly, you know, for your homepage. So it's who your visitors are and what they're doing on your site essentially, and you know what issues they face when they're engaging with your site. So if you don't have Google Analytics, I do recommend that you sign up to it just by going to analytics.google.com. You will need to put a little bit of code on your website essentially, for want of a better description, but it is definitely worthwhile doing. So I might just show you this briefly. And so sorry, Amanda, are you talking about the links that I just sent to everyone? Let me just see, maybe. I just sent those again. I'll put them into chat. Hopefully they're there now for you, Amanda. Let me know. Okay, good. Well, you let me know if they're there or not. Okay, no worries. Okay, so Google Analytics. This is Google Analytics. I'm just going to show you it briefly. So this is the homepage dashboard. And so it provides a range of data, and I'll just show you some of the things it provides you. So for example, it'll give you an overview of how many users you had over a given time frame, and you know what sort of conversion rate you had and the revenue you generated from that. So that's one thing. It'll also tell you, for example, how many visitors you've got on the website right at that moment. So that just popped up to 7, for example, and you can see what pages they're accessing. It'll also give you little insights into things that you could potentially improve, and additional ones too, but important information like where are your users coming from, what time of the day do they visit you, and what channels are they coming from. So these are all very, very important to understand where your visitors are coming from, how much of them are coming from search versus advertising versus social media, for example. And you can tunnel down into individual sources. So whether it's, you know, Google Ads or mobile Facebook, for example. Okay, so some other things though it will tell you is, sorry, did I just, now what device they're using, which is also important because you need to optimize for mobiles, for example, and just some other things along the lines of what your users are doing. Now I'm just going to flick through this sort of quickly here, but there are some other features within analytics, such as how your users behave on your website. Now, I'm just going to pause this for a second here. Now, this is a screen recording from earlier, but one of the important things, now I should probably change this example because this example isn't typical, but I just want to point out this column here, bounce rate, which you can see in the middle of that table there. The bounce rate is very important to identify if you've got a problem on your page. It might be a performance issue, and a bounce rate is where someone comes to your website and then they seemingly leave, within a few seconds without doing anything. And that's often an indication of a performance problem. Now, this one here is only 1.12%, but often bounce rates are very, very high, and we're talking 50, 60, 70, 80%. So it is something you should get a picture of to see if it is an issue that you are struggling with. It's often a problem on home pages because people tend to put, slideshows or, big hero images or video on the home page. So it can slow down the performance of the homepage. I'm just showing you here how with analytics, you can see how users flow through your particular website based on, for example, in this case, where they're coming from. So whether it's Google or Facebook. And as you can see, I'm just going to pause that. The visitors from Google are going to different pages compared to the visitors from Facebook. And that's often just along the lines of what I was telling you before, that the page that's most likely to rank through Google or Bing would be your homepage and your collections pages. Whereas with Facebook, you tend to promote a link, and it might be a particular product or some products or a particular page, and they go to that page. But nevertheless, it's important to see, how your visitors are behaving on your site. And these red arrows here will also tell you, for example, how many drop-offs you're having at each stage, and that might just indicate a particular problem. Even though we're primarily talking about the home page, it's also the entry point to the rest of your site. So it is important to have a good understanding of that. I'm just showing you here how you can highlight individual sources. So just Google, for example. So you can see there, of the 1.2K sessions, nearly half of them dropped off after that first stage. So that's where you might try to pinpoint what that particular issue is. Okay, so that's just a quick overview of analytics. Didn't go into too much detail there, but it is a worthwhile tool to understand exactly how people are behaving on your site. The other thing is to do maybe an SEO audit. And so this is an SEO reviewtools.com tool. If you can see the link there, I think I've also provided that in the chat. And this is their SEO checker. And so this is going to tell you how good your SEO is just on your homepage, essentially, your on-page SEO and a little bit of your off-page SEO. And I'll explain a little bit about what that means. So this is really about attracting customers to your site, how visible your homepage is, for example. Visibility is very, very important because that's how you get found. So an audit, I just put in the domain name and a keyword I want to rank for, and it comes back with a report. And, it gives you a score out of 100 and some things that you can potentially fix, for example. So just scrolling down here, it'll give you a list of to-dos, basically a to-do list. So the first thing it says there, the first area is you need to improve the number and quality of linking websites pointing to your domain. This is what we call backlinks or off-page SEO. Is the training Google offers? Yeah, I find Google training to be very good, Wendy. If you go to Digital Garage, something like that, I think they do very sort of user level, entry level training on all of their products. So definitely recommend that. Now, just going back to this, so you need to improve the number and quality of linking websites pointing to your domain. We'll talk further about this, but this is very, very important. This is about your authority. How authoritative is your domain or your business for that particular search term? Now, if you were to register a domain today and start a website, your domain authority starts at 1, basically, out of 100. And the most authoritative websites are, 70, 80, 90, for example, out of 100. Now, you want to build that domain authority over time. And one of the best ways to do that is to get links from other websites, particularly websites that are higher authority than you or are already authorities in that particular area. So we'll talk briefly about that shortly, but it is very, very important in terms of SEO and improving your visibility and your chance to rank. So just some of the other things there. So you need to add an H1 heading to your web page, and then a few other things like your title tag is too long. You're not using the keyword in your title tag. Your meta description is too long. Now, this is all, it's really jargon, but it's very easy to do yourself if you know what these things are. And I'll hopefully show you that by the time we finish this, even though it's going to be a very quick show, but it is really quite simple stuff to do. So these audits will also tell you a range of other things that you might find useful about the keyword that you're using and a range of other things. So audits are useful tools to also get a feel for where you stand. Finally, I will get off these audits in a minute, but they are important. Now, Belinda just asked, should I check with all keywords? So the key, I think, to be disciplined with SEO is to try and think of one keyword. When I say keyword, I'm talking about a phrase that you want to rank for. And so you should optimize that page. Even your homepage should be optimized around a primary keyword phrase. And that should be in your title and a few other places, which we'll talk about shortly. So ideally, you want to be sort of disciplined there and think, okay, what is the keyword phrase I want my homepage to rank for? And that's what you need to be using in that audit. So that would be my advice. How refined should that be? Well, when you say refined, I guess it should be, you should understand who your customer is and what they're searching for when they're finding you. So, this gets down to doing some keyword research, and you can do some basic keyword research and some more detailed keyword research on Keyword Planner, for example. We'll talk about that in a second, but it is probably the most critical thing to, and those links I talked about too, both of those are very, very important, combined with performance. If you don't get those three things wrong, you're going to struggle to get traffic to your site. So we'll talk about all three of those, but yeah, you really need to try and think about what that keyword phrase is, but we will talk about that in a second. Now, performance is really important because firstly, it's mostly overlooked, and therefore you don't really know as a website owner how good or bad your website's performing. And I know this for a fact because I do this every single day. I check, multiple websites a day for performance and find in most cases, it's usually subpar and also usually not what the website owner thought it was. And the reason for that is because you can't easily check your own performance if you don't know how to do that. People will tend to put their website in their browser and then you get a fast response and you go, oh, well, that's pretty fast. But the problem is that browsers have a cache or they store a version of your website in there so they can deliver it to you very quickly. So it gives you this false impression. So you need to use a separate tool, if you like, and there's a few of them around. And so here's three of them. Google Lighthouse is the standard, but you need to be using Chrome and a few other things. But you can try one of those other ones, webpagetest.org. I use GTmetrix, but either of them are fine. If you have an account with GTmetrix, you can actually choose where your user is. So by default, the user is in Canada, because it's a Canadian company. But if you have an account, you can choose a user in Sydney and also choose what sort of connection they're on, whether it's a broadband connection, fast, slow or medium broadband like NBN, or whether it's, a mobile connection, 4G, for example, or even 3G in worst case. So that will give you a real understanding of how good or bad your performance is on your website. So this is GTmetrix. I'm just going to show you how it works here. So very simply, you put in your domain. It needs to be the exact domain that you want to test. I've chosen yeah, a user in Sydney here, and in this case, LTE mobile, which is 4G. Okay, and then you can choose different types. Can't choose 5G yet, but you can choose different types of broadband and that sort of thing. And then analyze the site, and it'll go off and analyze your site. You can just bear with me. So you can see that one's got a pop-up. Pop-ups in the above the fold are not good, because a pop-up above the fold is it's gonna be the last thing that loads. So it's gonna be a very slow load. So this, I just got that website off the internet, by the way, so I don't know who it is or what, but as you can see, they got an F, and it takes nearly 10 seconds to load. And you can see the primary reason there is because there's a pop-up being displayed, and it's just slowing the whole delay down, the whole load down. So, you know, that's quite an easy fix. And in most cases, it is quite an easy fix. Yes, you can change to, sorry, Wendy, I'm just reading your question. You can change different types of mobile, different types of Chrome and what they're using. Yeah, and it is a nice website. And this is the thing, you know, it would probably be more successful than it, and I'm not saying it's not successful, but, you know, this is probably losing a big chunk of customers because of the bounce rate. They'll probably get there and go, particularly mobile users, because this is going to fill their screen and they might have trouble getting rid of that pop-up, and they'll just go somewhere else. At least a percentage would. So that's a very important thing to keep your eye on. And it'll also tell you some things that are wrong here. So you can see, you know, there's just some very big files, fonts, some big images. So I always recommend to my customers, don't have any images over 100K if you can. And as you could see back there, there were lots of images well over 100K, and that's just going to slow the website down. There's also some very big JavaScript files. It gets a bit more complicated with JavaScript and other things, but your images, you can optimize them. So you can make them smaller, and that's often a critical thing. So that's that image there, you know, and that's whatever it was, 300 kilobytes, which is 200 kilobytes, way too big. And particularly for mobile networks, for example. And there's a few others there you can see, well over 100K. So that's really going to slow the website down, and therefore make it get an F instead of maybe even a C or a D would be acceptable. So that's, you know, they don't need to be as big as they are. So that's a good sort of pointer, I think, something that everyone should do as a website owner. Yes, so Yvonne, I think a lot of people don't realize how big their images are. And it's only when you do this, and, you know, and I don't want to point the finger at anybody here, but it's often that web designers don't really understand the importance of optimize. It's about looks rather than, you know, how optimal the site's performing, because it's more a technical aspect of SEO. So a lot of people don't really fully appreciate this, but there's something to think about anyway. Okay, so you've done those audits and you've got a real feel for maybe some things that you need to do, maybe reduce some image sizes, that sort of thing. But let's just talk about planning the homepage. So I do have a homepage planner and checklist also in that list there. You might want to click on that. And once again, you can just do this in your own time. It's really just giving you a tool that you can use to sort of do it and understand what you need to do. So it's just a document like this. And you can see, so there's certain stages of building a homepage. Firstly, your planning stage. And I'll just stop that there. So we've talked about that first. So what are your goals? You know, and these should be specific goals about, you know, things like, for example, if you do have a high bounce rate, you want to make sure that bounce rate is below, say, 10% or something like that. Even 10% is low. So, but define your customer type and then develop content around that customer type and determine what your call to actions are. So I'm just going to skim through this because, you know, don't have a huge amount of time. So So that's the planning phase. And then there's really, just let that finish. So take some time going to go to a bit of effort in that planning stage. And then it's the building stage, and it starts from the top. So from the navigation, the headline that you're going to offer, what imagery you're going to use, what are your call to actions, breakdown of your services, bring in your other avatars, maybe have another call to action. It might be join your mailing list, for example, build your footer, then worry about, you know, the fonts and colors and that sort of thing, get more of the structure right. And a couple of things there. If you do want to do retargeting as well. So remember, when people visit your website, the likelihood of them, say, buying something on their first visit is probably slim. I think it's about 1 or 2%. So what you want to do is at least, you know, capture their email address maybe. And so you can continue marketing to them. And then the other option might also be to do retargeting. So that's where you've got Facebook Pixel and Tag Manager installed, so you can target them on Google or Facebook after they've visited your site. And then the launch. So, you know, make sure that before you launch that you do this 7-second test, which is, and we'll talk about that in a second, which is really the amount of time people have to decide whether they're going to continue or not, whether you've got their interest or not. And then optimize that. So it's just continual optimization to a degree. So think about what your goals are, you know, and in most cases, even though you might want to make a sale or get a member on a membership site, for example, in most cases, people aren't going to know who you are if you're not a well-known brand. So in most cases, it's going to be about awareness from the customer's perspective. And you might have some specific goals like bounce rate or conversion rate. And then go through who your avatar and their goals are. So you need to define who they are. I don't know if you've ever done an avatar sort of worksheet, but I'm going to provide you one that you can use as well to, you know, because when you do this, I know it's a bit of a pain having to do these things, but when you identify what their pain points are and what their touch points are, in other words, where are they touching you, for example, is it via a blog post or social media, or is it through search pages? You know, you start to get a feel for what sort of content you need to put where. So that's quite important. And just reinforcing that they're not ready to buy in most cases. So you've got to sort of get them through that first initial stage. And then you need that content. So what are you going to remember that they don't know who you are? You want to sort of engage them. So what sort of content do you need to put on your site to do that? And then what are the calls to action? So do you want them to subscribe, to view the products, request a quote, register for a webinar, you know, and, you know, rather than say just buy now, because, you know, that might be once they're browsing your shop, for example, then they're looking at specific products. But on the homepage, it might be something different to that. Okay, so this is where I would recommend, this is the other link that I've provided you there. This is a pretty typical customer avatar worksheet where you're identifying what they want to achieve, what their challenges or pain points are, and just go through that sort of worksheet and identify, you know, what sources of information they're using to find solutions to their particular needs. It will help you define who your primary target is, essentially. Now, try and put some detail here. So, you know, give them a name and, you know, give them some personality, if you like, so that when you're creating your content, you know that you're creating it for Kim, the 35-year-old mum from Perth, who, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So it just allows you to easily more create content for personas when you know who they are, and you can sort of personalize that. So download that in your own time and start to identify who your audience is. Okay, so this is the above the fold that I've been referring to, I guess, and then the below the fold. So the above the fold is that first section that people see. And really, so your homepage, like I said, is really, it's really like your storefront or your shop front. So, you know, if it's empty, then you're not likely to get people to come into the shop or into your business. So you need content there, but the above the fold is almost like your front door. So it's, you know, if it's difficult to open or just not appealing, then people aren't going to walk into that door. So you need to make sure that, one, it loads very, very quickly. You're talking to your particular client about, or the visitor, your persona, about their particular needs, and a call to action. Now, like I said before, there's 2 rules. You know, the 4-second rule's been around for a long, long time, and this is really how long it should take for your website to load. And, you know, so this gets down to performance and that sort of thing, where you do that performance test. So that is important. I think in Australia, we have a little bit of leeway there. It's probably not 4 seconds. It's probably something like 6 seconds, but nevertheless, it's still very, very important. And the 7-second rule is really where they're deciding on whether they're going to continue or not. So are they going to scroll down, or are they going to leave? Are they going to click on your navigation to go to another page, or just decide to go elsewhere? So this is where you really need to convince them that they need to continue on. So let's talk about that core message. If I could just go back to that page there. So that above the fold really should be where you, it should be your core message, essentially. So your core message is really 3 things. And I'll just talk about that. So, well, it should be answering these questions, but it should be comprised of 3 things, essentially. So your headline, your call to action, and any imagery you use. So the banner at the top about making good impression or giving info. So it doesn't necessarily matter, Belinda, whether it's an e-commerce site or not, but the above the fold, remember, that's what the first thing people see. And that's where they're going to decide whether they're going to continue on or not. So if your site's not at all appealing or slow, or just attracted them for the wrong reasons, they thought you were something else, but you're actually this, for example, then you know, you're going to lose those people potentially for good. So no, it's really more important than just a good, well, it is a good impression, but it's about making sure they engage and continue visiting your, you know, not visiting your site, scrolling and going to other pages and engaging with your site, essentially, and hopefully taking action on one of those calls to action, whether it's subscribing to your email list, or you know, registering for a webinar, or clicking on your collections pages so they can look at your different products that you offer, for example. So the headline is very, very important. We'll talk about that. Primary call to action, you know, we've touched on that briefly about what that should be, and that's going to depend on your particular business and the imagery you use. So ideally, the headline should be addressing your customers' pain points. It should be talking about how you provide a solution to their. So this is from Lauren Ballard. A question on call to action above the fold. I have a call us button in the banner. That's great. I think that's a good call to action, because it really depends. Is that what you want them to do? And I think that's a good call to action in most cases. And in a lot of cases, people, you know, don't have call us on their website, when that's often what people want to do. So no, I think that's a good call to action, Lauren. And you know, I don't know what your primary, you know, what your primary goal is here, if you want to sell them something or sign them up to a particular service. But like I said, they're not likely to do that in the first instance anyway. So yeah, so that's why your primary call to action on your homepage might be slightly different. So ideally, your headline should be, and I'll give you some examples in a second, but something where you're showing, you'll see this often in tourism type websites, where they're showing you people having a great time on the beach or whatever. And so it's really showing you in your desired after state, where you're thinking, oh, I wish I was there, and that sort of thing. So that's really what you want to do ideally. It's hard to do, I know, sometimes, but you know, that's the ideal scenario. And maybe if you can, ideally talk about who your primary persona is in that primary headline, in that headline. And then think about your call to action. And just be aware, and I've talked about this a few times, so where is your audience? In most cases, when they're coming to your site, like I said before, they're going to be in one of those three phases. It's either identifying a solution to a problem that they have. Now, I know that might not quite fit with your particular products or services, but at the end of the day, most people are looking for a solution to a problem. It might be a dress that they need to buy for the weekend, but it might also be a problem to a blocked drain, if you know what I mean. So there's all different things that people are looking for in terms of solution, but they might have decided on a solution or a few solutions. And so the first part is really a top of funnel or above the funnel. If you think of a sales funnel, they're looking for a solution. So that's awareness, where they need to find solutions. The middle of the funnel is where they're comparing different types of solutions. And then the bottom of the funnel is really where they've decided on a solution. They're looking for pricing comparisons or suppliers. If you have an A and B kind of site, do different rules. Sorry, what do you mean by A or B, Wendy? While you're answering that, I'll just in terms of the original, yeah. So this is, no, I think the same rules apply. But if you've got, say, a landing page and you want them to go one way or the other, you've really got almost three landing pages in a way. You've got the two option pages where you need to optimize them for each of those particular persona types. And then you've got so this is the categorical type homepage where they've got to choose one option or another option. You still need to optimize that with these sort of rules in mind. So hopefully when I go through some of these examples, I'll sort of give you some ideas. And here are some now. So I've just taken some headlines here and I've sort of, what would you call it, translated it into what I'm talking about here. So the headline says, transform your sales team into a revenue generating machine. So what this is actually saying is transform your existing asset into a known desired end result. Now, I know I'm getting all marketing on you here, but this is really some of the things you might need to consider here. So transform your existing asset into a known desired end result. So that known desired end result is knowing what their pain point is and what they're trying to achieve. Yes, headlines are different from slogans. So the headline is really, yes, it's really what is your core message that you're trying to tell your visitor, essentially. So that's one. Here's another one. Look, so competitive intelligence. I know these are also very marketing focused, but competitive intelligence for busy marketers. So this is desired end result for avatar. So their avatar is busy marketers, and the marketer's desired end result is some competitive intelligence, essentially. Yeah, so with your persona, with your headline, what you want to try and do, Belinda and others, is you ideally, if you can, talk about your avatar in there. Who is your avatar? So we provide solution for this type of person or persona or your avatar. So sometimes I talk about avatars or personas, same thing. So solution for persona, so whatever that solution is, or desired end result for persona. Let's have a look at some more. So build, publish, and A/B test landing pages without IT. This is accomplish desired end result without the known roadblock or bottleneck or pain point, you could say here, that they don't have the IT skills to do these sorts of things, or they have an IT department that's just got that's just got not enough time to do what they want. So that's really where you're referring to their particular pain point. Make your retailers better marketers. So this is make your constituent group better, or make your constituent group better at, you know, a more meaningful skill or a meaningful benefit. Now, I know these are examples, but it might be worthwhile just giving that a little bit of thought. Okay, so let's just talk about that imagery for a second. So people often talk about that image as a hero shot. It doesn't have to be a full screen hero shot, but the imagery that you use, ideally, it's going to look professional. That's the key criteria. It should look professional. But if you want to improve on good, then ideally it should show your product. So if your product is the key thing that you're trying to offer here, then show your product. There's no problem in doing that. That's better than just showing something that doesn't display your product, for example. But best would be what I was referring to before, where you're showing the customer as the hero in their desired after state, if you like. So you've solved their problem for them, and here they are, a happy customer. Now, I know it's difficult to do that sometimes. You need that imagery for a start, but ideally, if you can, that's what you want to sort of aim for. A bad hero shot would be something along the lines of, you know, it's all about you, essentially, and it's not about the customer. So a picture of your office building is probably a bad example, but it's just not the right type of imagery that you want to use. So here's another one. So this is one I actually just put together for someone. So I got this image actually off Unsplash or Pexels, I think. But we help persona achieve their desired end result. There's the persona there, very happy that she's achieved her desired end result. And then I've got a couple of call to actions. So if I was that persona, you know, it might cause me to either scroll down or to click onto one of those calls to actions. So it's important that they see themselves in that imagery, ideally. Even if it's not themselves, it might be the solution to their problem, which is your product or service, for example. So ideally, if you can do that, that would be ideal. Now, people talk more and more about a hero image, just a single image, as opposed to, say, sliders or like a slideshow or video. Even though video is good, it can also slow down performance. And maybe you could put, if it's an, you know, some sort of explainer video, definitely have that further down the page rather than in the section that that loads first. So now just about sliders. So okay, so a couple of things there. So let me just talk about sliders first. So sliders, what tends to happen with sliders is and they're a great thing because you can show maybe different products that you offer or different services, different types of personas in different scenarios, but you tend to have very large images and multiples of them. And so it just affects the performance. And, you know, once again, I know this for a fact because I find that this is often the case for slow performance. Now, video is the same. The video is really, if you're going to use video, it needs to be, you know, optimized for websites, and it needs to be a very short looping video. So not, you know, not a 10-minute video or anything like that. We're talking 10, 15 seconds if possible. If you can't sort of solve that problem, then try and just use a single hero image where you're showing that persona in that hero image. Now, how long is too long? So ideally, so this is the thing. So you need to make sure that headline, you know, because this is about also making sure that it looks good on screen, on a mobile screen and a desktop screen. So you obviously don't want that headline to be too big as well. So yeah, you need to keep that in mind. And there are some things I haven't really even talked about here. And this is where if you could, you should even try and put a keyword in there. So whatever that keyword was on that particular page. And, we'll talk about keywords as well. So yeah, you do want to keep it within reason. And I think within reason is how well it looks on a mobile screen, for example, or how good it looks on a mobile screen. So just briefly on calls to action. So the primary call to action is really what you want them to take, the action you want them to take on your homepage. And, you could also offer a secondary call to action as well. But it should be easy to understand. It should be something that it's not necessarily the close, but it's getting them closer to the close, if you like, or further down the funnel. So it could also be, a contact us type button, but it could also be a scroll, find out more, and just scroll them down the page. So there's a range of things you could offer here. But this one here, for example, so this particular guy, he's very well known financial mentor or something like that, for want of a better description. And so he is the product. So he is showing himself, and his call to action is start the quiz. So it's a fairly simple to understand. He wants you to take a quiz. What that enables him to do is qualify his customers that take that quiz. Here's another one. So it's showing it's showing the persona, it's showing the application, which is a finance tool, and a call to action, which basically says, get started. So, it's just a get started call to action. Yes, so you can definitely, you see the call to action at the top is also a very, very good option as well. So always have the primary call to action in the top right of your navigation if you can do that. Okay, so that's sort of a few things we've talked about above the fold. So that's really just the first part that loads is all we've really talked about so far. There's also below the fold. So I'm just gonna, so this is just one, I did this mock-up for some clients here, but you might include, for example, you might include, for example, some client logos, some certification logos, we're certified by these bodies, or we're a member of these associations. Solution for pain points. So this is where you're really talking about how you solve your particular problem. Now that's going to be different for every product. It might not be a 1, 2, 3 step type thing. Yeah, so you can have different calls to actions through the page, and I'll show you that here, where you might have, and maybe a primary call to action you should have also lower down the page, so they don't have to scroll all the way back up to take that action. But solution to pain point, that's where that comes into play, how it works essentially. So this is really explaining a little bit more about your particular solution. How does it help me? Now this is very generic. So this is where you might bring in different solutions for different types of personas, for example. Then something like an explainer video might be useful here, and that's well below the fold. It's not going to affect the loading of the website. And another thing about you could bring in here more about your different types of personas, for example, secondary call to action, some testimonials. And then here, in our case, because I pretended it was for Business Station, the different advisors that we have within Business Station. And then once again, the primary call to action, and then in this case, a contact form, and then your footers down the bottom. So quite a bit of content on there. It's important really, because it's sort of like it's like an executive summary of your website. That's what your homepage should sort of be, with, a bit of a summary of all of the content on your website and directing them to different parts of your website with calls to action. So how does it work? Who is it for? Calls to action, primary and secondary. Any products or categories you can introduce here. And more than just that, you can have your products and categories. So these are our different collections, for example, if you're a Shopify store, or product categories, or our services that we offer. But you could also have further down, if you are an e-commerce site, you could have a featured category, or you could have best-selling products if you are an e-commerce type store as well. Case studies, range of other things. It's where you bring in case studies and testimonials. And, you know, no problem there. If you do blogs, this is where you should be maybe introducing some of your blog posts, maybe having a social feed in there, like an Instagram feed, and also just being able to you know, have your social sharing, liking, following options available on your homepage, so people can share your content or like your content, for example. And then the footer. So just showing you some examples of what you might do there. So this is a how does it work section. So this is, you know, like a timeline type approach, but like I said, it doesn't need to be like that, and it might not apply to your particular product. So just keep, you know, take some of what I'm telling you here as just informational if it doesn't necessarily apply to your product. Now, I use this example only because it's actually showing you ways of design type things here, but I just thought it explained very well about how it works. So it's Contiki, connecting young travelers, persona, to the time of their lives, desired end result, since 1962, which is showing some sort of longevity and authority. So epic global adventures for 18 to 35-year-olds. So desired end result, epic global ventures for 18 to 35-year-olds. That's their persona. How it works, lots of choices, details sorted, 18 to 35-year-olds, expert team, no regrets. Pretty simply put there, but if you're, you know, an 18 to 35-year-old looking to travel, it'll probably, you know, cause you to find out more. Who's it for? So it's an example here where you're bringing in your other personas. So, you know, yeah, so they can identify with it. They can think, well, this is for me. I'm going to go there and find out more about that sort of, that information that relates to my needs. An example here where, you know, you've got different types of users within an organization, for example. So social signals, I did talk about this as well, where you might also want to have the ability, you know, where your people can share your content or like your content, follow your content. So you're getting those social signals through as well from your social media channels, because that's important. It's a little bit like the backlinks, the other websites linking to you. It's showing Google and search engines and just, you know, your online visibility. It's showing that, you know, people are interested in what you're talking about. You are an authority in your particular area. You can also have feeds. People often have an Instagram feed or something down the bottom of the page, as well as the blog post, which I've already mentioned. So just the footer, just finishing off this section of the below the fold here. So this is where you might want to have some of these things included. So you don't need these to be up above in the top navigation, because that's going to be distracting and maybe lose you some potential customers because they can't find what they're looking for, or they've been distracted and gone elsewhere. So these sorts of things, I think people are well versed in looking at in the footer if they want to find out what your privacy policy is or your shipping policy or something like that. You know, the only thing I think that matters there maybe is, you know, the contact us page. You might want to put the contact us in your main navigation. So, you know, here's an example of a really good footer section. You know, it's got a lot of information in here, whether it's their social, the social icon, so you can follow their social channels. You can sign up, request a demo, how it works, the features, why them, a bit about the company, different tools you can use and resources. Now, I'm not saying yours needs to look like this, but as you can see, you can put a lot of information in the footer of your website. Therefore, you're keeping the above the fold and below the fold clear to make sure that they're going to take the action that you want them to, ideally. Okay, I'm almost out of time. Sorry about this. A bit slower than I thought I was going. Now, just some other things I'm going to talk about. So I did sort of mention this. You should somewhere, if email marketing is important to you, you should try and collect their email address. So have a big embedded form there. So rather than maybe a pop-up or something down the foot of your page, have a big form to say, sign up to our email list. And also think about your Facebook pixel and Google retargeting as well. Just going to flick through some of these things now. Invest in quality images if you can. Now, my example here might not be ideal, but you know, it does provide a way for people to, I guess, think about your website in terms of whether it's a trustworthy brand or not. So it is fairly important that you do use good quality images. If you are taking your own product photos, for example, then maybe just follow, there's a good guide here by Shopify, which is in the resources at the end, which is about how to take your own product photos. But there are also image libraries around, such as Unsplash and Pexels. If you're not aware of those, really good image libraries for using high quality images, depending on your particular product, of course. You still need to attribute the photographer, but you don't need to pay for it. So yeah, Lauren, you just asked about .au domains versus .com.au domains. Yeah, I was just speaking to someone about this yesterday. Should we be rushing out to purchase the AU? I think if it's your particular brand, I would probably be doing that to protect your brand, definitely. Or if it's a particular domain that you've been trying to get for a while. But I think it's more about trying to, so if you've got the .com.au version, I would possibly think about registering the .au version as well. It might provide you a bit more protection in terms of your brand. In terms of just visibility and that sort of thing, I don't think it's going to make much difference, to be honest. They'll both be visible. They'll both be good for marketing to an Australian audience. But I would definitely consider doing that to protect your brand at least. Now, just very, very quickly, mobile, think about your mobile version of your website. If you do have the option of designing in mobile form, you know, do that in mobile view. Do that so you can see what it looks like on a mobile screen before before you're losing customers because the images are too small, font's too difficult to read, or the tap targets, the buttons and the menu items are just too small to tap. So just keep that in mind. And, you know, there are a few tips here, like, you know, don't use pop-ups, for example, above the fold if you can, particularly on mobiles anyway. And optimize your images using something like Tiny JPEG or Tiny PNG, for example. There are mobile-friendly tests you can do just to test that. And the Google one there, if you just search Google mobile-friendly test, you'll be able to find that and they'll give you a bit of a feel. Now, I didn't realize how miles behind I am, so I'm just going to flick through this quickly here. If you can, bear with me. I think it would be worth your while. Now, this is just talking more about SEO now. Now, SEO is obviously really important for attracting customers to your site. What we've mostly been talking about is really converting customers when they come to your site. Now, this is about attracting customers to your site. So SEO is a combination of a few things, and we will talk about that in a second, but content is structure is the starting point. And the reason why it's important is because from your perspective, it gives you structure around which you can logically place your content. You know, it's a little bit like a topic for an essay, for example. So you know that this silo here is about these particular product categories. So you start to write using certain keywords around that particular content. But also site structure is important because it gets back to that, how they all the lower pages add authority to your homepage. So it's much more likely to rank. And a good site structure makes it easy for Google or Bing to crawl your site, and it's easier for users to navigate your site. So that's the first thing. Then you need to think about keywords. And keywords are really important. And we know this because, well, Google tells us so, that it is the most important thing, not the most important thing, one of the most important things. Because if you have all the keywords in the world on your page, but your site's super slow, or you don't have any backlinks to your site, then that's going to help. It's going to have an effect on your ability to rank. So, Ron, design a good sitemap. So your sitemap should just be automatic. So there's two types of sitemaps. One of them is an XML sitemap, and that's what Google uses to, understand what your site's structured like and how it's all connected. That's really important that you have a sitemap and Google knows about it. There's also an HTML sitemap, which allows people to find things on your website. So yeah, your sitemap is very, very important. It should be from a beginner's perspective, your sitemap should just be done automatically for you. So if you have a particular goal from SEO perspective, it would be to, and this goes back to the question before about keywords. Yeah, so, about site structure is really important. So site structure is often just about thinking about your subpages and what goes underneath those pages, but also about your navigation, making sure your navigation makes sense as well. Essentially, that's it. So just really making sure things are in silos, I refer to it as. And then what you can do is, so for a particular, say, product category or a category page or a service page, you want to identify well, let me go back to this particular one. For your home page, and this applies to every single page on your website, you need to identify and selectively use a target keyword phrase. So one phrase, 3 to 5 words for every page on your website. You could use related terms and variations and synonyms as well, but you want to identify what that word is for every page. Keeping in mind, we're talking about the home page here. And then you need to use that keyword in certain places. So in the title, ideally in the copy of the web page, the body text, in the image tags, and that sort of thing. And you also need links to other pages. So let's just quickly talk about keywords. So when I'm talking about keywords here, we're talking about 3 to 5 word phrases, and they're often called long tail keywords. Most phrases, search terms are long tail keywords, 70, 80% of them. So there are lots more of them available than the short, single phrase keywords, like, for example, t-shirts. So if you decided t-shirts was the keyword you're going to want to rank for, you'd find it very difficult because, you've got lots of competition, and therefore you're going to get less traffic to your site and therefore less conversions. So you want to identify some longer keyword phrases that are easier to rank for, will attract more traffic to your site, and therefore higher conversions. So here's some examples. Rather than builder, if you're in Mount Barker and you're a home builder, maybe Mount Barker home builder would be a good 4-word phrase that you might want to use on your homepage as a keyword. Now, this is a product example, but so probably not a good example for this webinar. But if you have a dress, so rather than trying to rank for the word dress, if it's a maxi dress and it's a floral cotton summer maxi dress, then use those words in your keyword phrase. Same with services. So maybe you could use like a feature of your service and maybe a location. So it could be small business accountant Perth, for example. And then you've got to put these in certain places. Now, I know this sounds really simplistic, and this is sort of simplistic example, but so, for example, in this scenario, if I was Tom's Mechanical, I've decided that, and I'm in Darwin, I've decided that car mechanic Darwin is the keyword I want to rank for. So I put that into the title of that page, into the URL of that page, into the body text of that page a couple of times at least. Might also have some synonyms, or not synonyms, associated terms, like, for example, roadworthy certificate, brake repair, and have links to those service pages. And then I put the keyword in the alt tag of the images. And that's really what you need to do from an SEO perspective. So I'm just going to quickly show you that. So hopefully you've got enough time. We've got 5 slides left. So I'm just going to go through that quickly for you. So the first thing you've got to do is, well, this is sort of going backwards actually. It's not the first thing. It's probably the last thing you do in terms of what we're talking about here, but I'm talking about it first. Your meta title and meta description. This might be a bit hard to get your head around. Your meta title and meta description is purely what shows up in a search result. So it's can be slightly different to what's on your page in that it's about trying to get people to click on your link. So it's about trying to sell your link over other links on a search page. So it's very important from that perspective that you sort of optimize it to make it attractive, essentially. So, often you'll see things like, Afterpay available, sale on now, free shipping Australia-wide. These are things you don't necessarily want on the page title, but you do want it in your search results so people see that and then maybe click on that, that link. So your meta title is that blue part, and your meta description is the paragraph. They both have certain limitations. The title, 60 characters, the description, 160 characters. You want to use all of those characters if you can, but ideally not more than them. So use 60, but ideally not any more than that. Okay, so where do you put them? You put them in the head section of your HTML. Now, luckily, if you're using any of the big platforms like WordPress or Shopify or Wix or any of them really, they'll allow you to do this yourself. So I'm just going to show you some examples here. This is Wix, and you can see Wix here. You can, if you go to the site menu and then click on the 3 dots next to an individual page, you can set the Google settings there for SEO, where you are defining what that title is and the description, etc. Same with WordPress and others that use Yoast, for example, or an SEO plugin. They'll often allow you to edit that using just the edit snippet, and you can just change that headline and that sort of thing, the description. With Shopify, for all the other pages, it's just at the bottom of the page on Shopify. But for the home page, you actually have to go into the preferences section and you set the homepage title and the homepage meta description there. You'll notice they say 70 characters and 320. Ideally, you want to keep it a little bit less than that, more like 60 and 160. Okay, so that's your meta title. So that's about selling your link once it's on a search page. It's not about necessarily getting onto the search page. That's really about some of that on-page SEO I talked about earlier, including some of these things. So you need to add your keyword phrase to every image on your page. So if it's your home page, it's got some images on your home page, they should include in their alt tag what your keyword is. And this is all about enabling Google and Bing to build a picture about what your homepage is about. So once again, it's easy to do. All you need to do is in your particular website platform, this is WordPress. If you edit that, you'll be able to add the alt text there, which is the keyword. Good copywriter. That's a good question. I do know a few. I might need to probably get back to you on that one, Brian. I don't, just off the top of my head. Alt text. So with alt text, I'll just, there you go. So Russell knows a good example there. Thank you, Russell, for a good recommendation there. So this is Shopify, same thing. You edit the image, you'll be able to add that tag. And this is Wix, and all the other ones are fairly similar. Wix, slightly different. It says, tell us what the image is about. So in answer to your question, in terms of how long should that be, it should include your keyword and it should be as descriptive as possible while including that keyword, but you're limited to 125 characters. So in most cases, when you're doing these things on your platform, whatever website you're using, they'll tell you what the limitation is, in most cases. Now, just gonna sort of finish off here with links. So links are super important. There's 2 types of links. There's internal links, and this is useful for helping customers find things and go to pages through links through your navigation or your products, collections or product categories, for example, but also just through links within the text of your website, for example, like a link like that, for example. And you should aim to have multiples of these per page, ideally. So on your homepage, at least 10 of those to other parts of your website. Now, keeping in mind, this also includes your navigation. Now, external links are about the authority of your website, your domain authority, your DA. And what you want to do is try and build that over time. So all of these other things you do will, you turn the cogs quickly, if you like, whereas this DA cogs moves very slowly. So you need to optimize everything else, and that will slowly increase your domain authority. One of the best ways to do that is to have links to your website from other higher authority websites, or websites with higher domain authorities. And there's lots of ways you can do that. Industry associations or membership type sites, if you're a member of a Chamber of Commerce, for example, or some sort of industry group, if you're certified by an organization, for example, these are often good things to get links from. So it's really where they're listing you on their website, and they have a link from there or they list your website address, essentially. That is a backlink to your website. There's lots of ways you can do this. Guest blogs is another way. If you want to know how to find a guest blog for your particular product, just search Google for "Write for Us" and then a particular topic that you want to write about, and you'll find there's guest blog opportunities that way. Your socials are very important citation sites or sites for backlinks. So your Facebook page will have a link to your website. The Google My Business, very, very important. If you haven't got a Google My Business profile, grab your, claim your business profile and verify your business, and make sure you've got your website address on there, of course. Other business directories as well, review sites, and then there's often what we call citation sites. And these are really business directories like these that you can submit your business to. As far as I know, I do have a list of them in the resources I've provided, and you need to go to each of these and submit your business like any other business directory. So I would recommend doing that to as many as you can, really. These are all quite high domain authorities, so in the order of 60, 70, 80 plus. So if you can get a link from these, and remember, they're going to list you in a particular business category, for example, or industry category, it does provide authority to you and to your website. This makes a huge difference. Remember this, the performance and the keywords, those three things, I can't emphasize enough how important they all work in combination in terms of attracting website traffic to you and therefore ranking on search engines. Okay, so sorry about the bit of a delay there. It took a little bit longer than I thought, way longer than I thought. There are some resources there if you want to access those. Hopefully they're also in the link in the chat as well. And you will find hopefully some of the things I talked about there. If not, you've got my email address there. If you have any problems accessing that, or some of the things I talked about isn't in there, please just send me an email. Or if you have a question about anything I've talked about today, please connect to ricky@businessstation.com.au. And yeah, I appreciate your time, and sorry for taking longer than I would have thought to do this. I just want to point out too that this is my presentation today. Thank you, everyone. My presentation today is part of the Digital Solutions Program, the federal government program or federal government initiative under the ASBAS, or Australian Small Business Advisory Service program. Now, Business Station delivers that in Queensland and Northern Territory and WA. If you're not on that program, I know a lot of you are as part of this, but if you're not, please think about checking that out. It's businessstation.com.au, and you'll find more information there. Other than that, thank you very much. I hope that was of interest to you and you got something out of it. Thank you very much, Lauren and Amanda and everyone else that's given their kind words. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll speak to you all soon. Okay, I'm just going to stop sharing now too. Thank you. Thanks, Russell. Bye, everyone.